Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, I welcome John Doris and Jamie Barker of HCL-PowerObjects to talk about the evolution of Microsoft's Power Platform in the last year. HCL-PowerObjects is the sponsor of this episode. As Power Platform's technology has enjoyed greater adoption, Microsoft partners and customers alike have been forced to address the resulting challenges and opportunities like security and governance, migration away from legacy technology, and licensing. We get into all those areas, as well as topics like the future of front office and back office application users, the impact of Microsoft Teams on Power Platform, as well as Jamie and John's experiences helping organizations build centers of excellence. All right, I am here with John Doris and Jamie Barker of HCL-PowerObjects. John, Jamie, welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I thought maybe we'd start with some introductions for our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, some of your focus in the Microsoft space, and maybe we can go from there.
Yeah, perfect. Jamie, if you don't mind, I'll go first because I'm alphabetical order. Not really. My name's John Doris. As you say, I work for HCL-PowerObjects. I've been in the dynamic space for probably 13 years. Doing kind of CRM3 from the very start, and kind of as everyone finds when they get kids, they kind of move away from the consultancy space more into kind of a solution director space. My focus, I suppose, over the last year and a half really has been around the HCL-PowerObjects Power Platform position, and that's kind of utilizing people like Jamie kind of from a technical perspective and a usability perspective, but also kind of putting a governance wrapper on that. So the challenge with the Power Platform, I suppose, is you're implementing and you're selling the benefits to both people from kind of more of an IT infrastructure background as well as the app maker community. So you have to have a very well-rounded kind of pitch on what you do. Jamie, sorry I talked a lot. Over to you.
That's fine, John. Hi, I'm Jamie Barker. I'm a solution architect at HCL-PowerObjects. So I've been working in Dynamics 365 Power Platform for about 8 years now. I originally started out kind of very much from the what's termed as the citizen developer space. So I was a project manager on a Dynamics project, kind of like tinkering, and kind of fell over to the dark side. And I seem to get more and more technical as the time goes on. So
yes, you are.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. All right, excellent. With regard to Power Platform, the thing I really wanted to start with was to really get your input on where things are right now in the space. From my perspective, I hear from Microsoft, sometimes I hear reports of, particular cases or particular, wins or successes. But at a high level, as you kind of go through your days, your weeks, your quarters, how would you characterize sort of where, your clients are at and maybe the market is at when it comes to sort of interest in Power Platform related projects and services and, solution delivery? How much interest is there? How much momentum are you seeing now compared to, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago in terms of the activity?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of points around that. Like most companies, the level of maturity around the Power Platform it varies greatly. You can identify some of the organizations that we work with where they have built up a quorum of users, both in the business and both in IT, that they love the technology, they believe in the technology and want to implement the technology. So you kind of got from both from an IT perspective, business perspective, this willingness to take that leap forward, right? And it is a leap. I don't think anyone can pretend it's not. What a lot of organizations, and I don't want to use the word betting on, but what they're looking at, there's all these applications that we have out there. We have a list of applications that are coming to end of life, that are expensive to support internally and externally, or there's no one supporting them anymore at all. And then you've got a list of backlog items that people have, and people are believing that the Power Platform gives them the skill set to bring all those legacy applications into a really good governance model, that is supported both in the short term and the medium term and the long term by the Microsoft platform. But then we also have people that, within the business are saying, like, we get it, but we're not willing to make that leap yet. So, they want to do your app in the days to kind of build that support within the organization. Then they want to move on and say, actually, we've got a good business case here that we can use to kind of build support within the organization. So they want to do a POC. So kind of, we kind of have those three kind of areas. People that are starting out, they want to do those apps. They want to know more. You've got people that have done their homework. They believe in it, but people in the wider organization don't believe in it yet. Those people who need to create a business case to actually go out and and do what is a significant and something that has to be a very well calculated business case. And then you got the people that are that have jumped and said, we're going to do this, but we need to solve the problems around good governance. So, but I mean, it's the future, Jason, isn't it? Like, I mean, that's where all the excitement are. Is these things go in cycles, but right now, if you haven't got a point of view around the Power Platform, you're not going to be in business much longer, Jamie.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the past 12 months we've seen interest in the Power Platform rapidly increase, and I think in part that's due to the pandemic that's hitting the globe at the moment. A lot of organizations are having to sort of about change and become more digital, and that whole digitization of business processes, the Power Platform leverages itself really well for that. We've seen an explosion in the usage of Teams as people communicate more via Teams, and the Power Platform is just an add-on. Well, it's more than an add-on, but it is added to that. I know sort of as soon as the pandemic hit, at HCL-PowerObjects, we had a lot of interest from day one as people pivoted from sort of doing paper-based processes, or they had to put in new health safety checks and balances. And the Power Platform has sort of enabled that digitization of those processes.
Jamie, isn't it funny? Like, I mean, we do a lot of marketing campaigns, and when you do the marketing campaigns, around the Power Platform, people ask you, what are the people that we should talk to within your organization, and usually, when you talk about the kind of names of people, you're talking about, I want to talk to the CIO, I want to talk to the CTO, I want to talk to the CMO, I want to talk about the head of customer service, actually. But the people that we are really targeting are those people that are dealing in the modern workplace, because Teams and the Power Platform, are seen as the one platform now, really, as well, which we expected it to. But people have bought into it a lot more, and you find the people that we're discussing proposals with, the people that we're demoing to aren't those traditional people anymore. They're actually the modern workplace people, to see how we can leverage the Power Platform across the from a collaboration piece as opposed to purely single business processes. It's just totally changed.
That's really interesting. And why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, look. To be perfectly honest, right? Microsoft. We you look at the licensing structure for the Power Platform, and we have our challenges with it. Of course we do. But if you're trying to get people to see the bigger picture, but actually, if you talk about it in context of the Teams investment people have made, and if you talk about it in the context of Project Oakdale, it becomes a more of a palatable conversation, which allows people to show true value of Teams and the Power Platform before they jump into a bigger commitment. And I think, and I'm probably going off piste here a little bit, but I think sometimes, when we work with Microsoft, and when we work with some of the guys in some of the big organizations that we have, they're trying to find that one app that will convince the entire organization to have a large investment in licensing, and that just doesn't work. You know what I mean? What you need to do is you need to show the benefit of the Power Platform in the context of something that you're doing already, and Teams seems to be one of the major things for that as well. It's an easy sell in that way. So that's my point of view on it, I suppose. Jamie, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I think the ability to have one platform where all your data resides, because you've got multiple options, and it makes it easier, and all the components work together. That just helps the whole Power Platform story, and it eases the adoption, and that fuels the growth. If people can pick up the tools and use them, easily from day one, then people are going to use them and build on that. And for me, from what I've seen, with working with clients, I've seen some great applications that are built quite quickly, and that's what people want. They don't want to spend a lot of time working on projects. They want to get to the value straight away.
Yeah, I mean, another thing we've seen, I suppose, is one of the poster childs, and we won't name any names here, but one of the poster childs for the Power Platform is an organization that we that we're doing the COE for, and we're building out of their ops, and they're seeing it from a slightly different perspective. They're kind of seeing it from an agility point of view, the ability to not that they've targeted that we're going to say these are the 10 apps that we're going to create. They're saying, okay, that if we build 40 apps and if 10 of them go into production, that's a pretty good hit rate as well, isn't it? Like, so it's just, it's the agility and the speed to production of apps as well. So yeah, there's a number of ways we're seeing it. And I think when we are talking to stakeholders, each one of them has kind of a different view in it. And when we do, when we do our webinar or we do a pitch to customers, you're kind of asking the customer first. You're saying to them, these are things we can discuss today. What's of interest to you, and then we'll take them on the journey of how the Power Platform can support that, or how good governance can support the Power Platform. And there's so many different stakeholders with the Power Platform. It's not your traditional conversation. You need to know the subject matter and to show benefits, but also alleviate any fears people have as well of going down this route.
Interesting. And it really, to me, comes back to this, I guess, tension or kind of balance between what it sounds like you're saying, that there are people, like you said, who are used to working with teams who are much more sort of on using productivity applications as opposed to traditional, maybe, CRM or bigger enterprise solutions, who are perhaps building apps or have sort of the need that they're picking up on, wanting to maybe get their hands dirty with Power Platform tools. And then you have the, more of the top-down model that traditional enterprise solution would come from. And you actually kind of need both sides when you're talking about a successful Power Platform launch. I guess you need the enthusiastic sort of application developers and users, but you'd still need the I guess like the corporate, buy-in.
Totally. And Jimmy and I were on a call with quite a large organization the other day, and it was brilliant. Because you do need both sides of things, isn't it? Like you do in any organization, you need that enthusiast who drives you forward, but it's kind of like you need this, like the devil and the little angel on the shoulder, right? Kind of the devil saying, do it, push that button, and the angel saying, like, hold back, and just take it easy. Let's get this right, because we could create a monster quite easily. And those are the two conversations you have, and you need both those people as those stakeholders, don't you? I mean, I kind of on that point, Microsoft have done some great work. I mean, the platform's awesome, isn't it? But there's always those little areas that Microsoft asked partners to innovate or just to think about or have a point of view on. And I think what you're coming from, Jason, there is really around an app maker or app governance piece, and I think that's critical to any organization, unless you have that in place from day one. And to be perfectly honest, most organizations are probably on day 100 and are trying to get those guardrails in. And I suppose, Jimmy, I mean, some of the things we're doing around that area are quite interesting, aren't they?
Yeah, I think going back to your point, Jason, where you said, you've got the top down or the bottom up approach, and the Power Platform is a bit of both. And one of the great things I like about it is that, yes, it's accessible and people can build apps from all backgrounds. You can still wrap that governance around there to sort of instill that confidence in the platform to make sure that, it abides by the policies and the sort of data and the data governance that you set in place. And there's a lot of capability there. And some of the organizations what we've seen, they've started on that path with Power Apps already, but they've not taken full advantage of the deep levels of governance that it has. So, yeah, it's interesting when you go into organizations and sort of look under the hood about how their Power Platform is set up, and just see how different people are applying those layers of it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of people aren't applying any layers at the minute, totally. They might, their awareness of the COE starter kit, the Microsoft one is there, so they can monitor tools as well. But, they don't have a view on what they're using in the regions, what connectors are they're using within those regions, how often an app is being shared and stuff like that. And, that's just ITIL 101, isn't it? That you have to have in that place. That they have, we've got organizations that apps have been shared with the entire organization that are hooked up to SAP connectors, and that just can't happen, right? Because look, it's an awesome platform, right? But very quickly that awesome platform can get a really, really bad name because of data governance, right, as well. So you have to be in control, and these organizations are discovering that quite quickly. But for that to be a success in their organization, they need to have some way of categorizing those applications into the productivity apps where they don't need that level of governance. Or people talk about productivity apps, people talk about important apps, and they talk about critical apps, that quad, that kind of triangle, the pyramid that Microsoft talk about. But for me, kind of, you've got in that important piece, you've got two levels happening. Ones that kind of need to be supported by your support team, and one that kind of are more productivity apps or within business units as well. But you need to get that right. And I suppose a couple of things we've been working on, Jason, is defining kind of a joiners, movers, and leavers process within the platform. So what people class as a JML process, that what should happen when you join a certain team within a certain region. What should you get access to? You'll automatically be given access to the default environment, but we don't want you there. We want you in another environment as well with these access connectors. So you've automatically got those guardrails. What happens when someone moves or leaves the organization? Who are those apps owned by? Just kind of setting out that process and using the tools within the Power Platform to make that easier. The other kind of things we've been thinking about is kind of that app onboarding process as well. These enterprise organizations, why would they need 5 apps that do exactly the same thing? So trying to say when an app is created or an app has been shared multiple times, that actually has to go through a justification process why that app exists. Because if that app exists, someone has to support it. It does cost money. So trying to take that through kind of that governance piece that says when the app is created, do we look at the different components about it? What does it do? Categorize that app, who owns that app, and so on. So basically kind of, a good governance around an app itself. I mean, that's really important. Jamie, we've done something similar, I think, with really kind of the app makers as well, haven't we? Or maker onboarding, we like to call it.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of content, a lot of people creating apps, as we've mentioned previously. And I think one of the things that we like to sort of instill is that not only just app onboarding, but making sure that the makers, the app makers, when they create apps for the first time, that they're onboarded as well, to make sure that they've got all the support they need, and potentially push all the sort of course content they require, and give them some good guidance and best practice to make sure they start off on a solid footing. So the apps they create, they're not only sort of useful for them, but they can be rolled out across a wider user base as well to really drive the value of the time they've invested in making that application. So that's one area we always look to sort of promote, as well as sort of reusable content as well. Just push them in the right direction. So if they are building an app, just push them maybe to where the reusable components are for the platform, or any sort of Power Automate flows that they might want to leverage. Just sort of make sure they're aware where they can go and find them, so they're not reinventing the wheel all the time.
No, that's totally, because every time you reinvent the wheel, it's probably going to cost you money in the Power Platform, so it's important. And I think
support it.
Well, yeah, exactly right. I mean, in terms of the kind of app maker onboarding as well, what you can kind of do, I suppose, is we've done with some customers is set up kind of a curriculum. It says that, if you've created an app and you shared it multiple times, quickly check whether you've done all the courses that you're supposed to have done around the Power Platform. And they could be, the Microsoft standard Power Platform courses, or it could be that, you might have a data compliance courses that you need to be able to do before you're certified to become that app maker. And what we can do is we can quarantine that app until you have done those courses. And this is, what you're trying to do, I suppose, is Jamie, you're trying to keep innovation within the organization, right? And make people, feel empowered, the app makers feel empowered to use the platform, but making sure that they are protected by this good governance and the organization's protected, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a balance between agility and risk at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, I like that, Jimmy. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And I've copyrighted that. So you need to balance that out, because businesses need to be more agile, and the Power Platform is perfect for that. But it has all the it has hundreds and hundreds of connectors that you want to sort of be aware of, and make sure people aren't hooking up your customer service solution to Twitter. I always roll out that example. And the Power Platform gives you the capabilities to control that, so you can balance have a sort of a nice balance between agility and risk.
I suppose the other thing is around the, I don't know. I mean, so you will have people that are trying to create an application, and they may go into a reusable content library and say, I want to start with this application. I want to build on top of it. But you'll also have people who will say, okay, we have an app for that, but could we have an app for this instead? That is a variant on that, or a brand new one as well. So I suppose one of the big areas is we keep on talking about is empowering people, but also enabling that agility and that innovation within the platform as well. So one of the biggies for us is to have a innovation area as well. So if a app doesn't exist and that person isn't confident to create that app, essentially they can go off and put an item in the product backlog to say, this is what we're thinking about doing. We mightn't have the skills ourselves. Oh, can I go to some training maybe? Oh yeah, I've done that training, I'll build it myself. If not, let's have an ideation portal. And I'm always not sure whether ideation is a made up word or not, right? But it's a good word. The idea to say, okay, we've got this business challenge, how would we build this, right? And then if people upvote that, the ability for a certain budget within the organization to be put to said that these are the apps that we'll champion to be built out by possibly a COE or something like that can become just productivity apps, or they might become important apps within the organization. So some really good thoughts on that, and Microsoft supplies so much stuff out of the box, but it's just trying to take it to the next level to say these are the governance aspects from an app maker, an app perspective, that maybe those gaps haven't been filled yet, and there's it's some IP that we have, which is just scratching that itch for people.
Yeah, and the COE starter kit is just that. It's a starter kit. And
it's true, Jimmy. That's exactly what it says. You're right. Yes, I never spotted that.
Yeah, no, you'd be amazed at how many people sometimes overlook that aspect, and they think it's the be all and end all. And again, working with clients, I've seen some gaps that they've called out, and that's what it's there for. It's there to get you on a good, strong footing, and then you just build your COE around that. It's just that's one aspect of the process is the technical. Getting the COE up and running. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose we've done these, and I don't want to go on about COEs because COEs mean a lot of things, different things to different people. But the order that you do the kind of COE piece, in terms of the setup and the execution of the COE before you kind of have your business as usual piece is sometimes your as is process. Your kind of your technical audit of your existing Power Platform actually informs what you want to do going forward. So customers aren't, and I hate to use the word customers really, but they don't know what they've got and what position they're in. So we're big advocates of spending, a week or a 2-week period to actually do the kind of as is assessment to say, okay, well, how many apps have you got? How many flows have you got? How many connectors are you using? Because actually, if you show people where the problem may lie, it helps them inform what decisions they make about the guardrails they need to be put in place, and then we can put those guardrails in place. So like most people, you learn with the Power Platform not just what it is, what it can do, but actually how to implement the Power Platform successfully within your organization.
One of the things I was wondering about was when you're talking about, Center of Excellence, starting with a starter kit, do you find that different organizations really do need to go in very different directions in terms of what additional supports, guardrails, rules, reports they need? Or does it tend to follow a fairly common set of steps for when you're partnering with them in terms of what services you provide or how you're guiding them?
Yeah, I think the challenges are the same, aren't they? I think, Jason, you'd agree with that as well. It's the same, right? That people need to know, what they're doing right now, and set expectations within the people. What kind of changes for people is the type of organization it is. If it's a 20 user organization, it's a 100 user organization, or it's 130,000 people organization, like some of the ones we deal with even bigger. The number of stakeholders within the COE is important, right? Do they have one central COE within kind of a child COEs around it, each with its own budget as well? So some of the challenges we see with two particular COEs are running as well is who pays for the COE, right? Who pays for the support that's associated with the Power Platform as well, and that's a major challenge, right? People need to forecast, what the Power Platform is going to cost them on a yearly basis, and again, Microsoft just keep on bringing up new stuff. So there is the ability to look over a 3 or 4 month period of what your consumptions has been, which that consumption will inform what your forecast will be going forward. But then we have these enterprise customers that are working with us to find a way of finding a way to bill back that consumption and the actual support, that the support costs for the Power Platform to the other areas of the business as well. And that can get quite political at times, but you need to have a starting point. And these are the things that they aren't the technology issues. They're actually the operational issues within organizations. Jamie, I don't know if you've anything to add there.
Yeah, you're right about the size and scale of the organization. That does have an impact on some of the processes. But there's also, the sectors organizations work in. Some are more heavily regulated than others. So that needs to be taken into consideration when sort of deploying the COE starter kit. I know, we've worked in sort of pharma, and there's sort of GXP considerations.
True, yeah.
We're managing sort of the Power Apps and Power Platform. So, yeah, it's not just about the size of the organization. The complexity can be for smaller organizations, depending on the sector they work in. And the processes, onboarding processes will, for app makers, can vary, same as onboarding new applications. That can vary.
Yeah, also, Jamie, some organizations, they'll want us to own the COE for 6 to 9 months, and then gradually, they'll shadow us, and then they'll run the COE ourselves. And then you've got some customers who want a COE light, right, is to understand where they're at, and us to put, work with them for 2 months or something like that, to put the processes in place. And then they just want us to do almost a support or maybe a couple of days consultancy around it to get them moving, and then we'll check back in. And so there is that thing about what skills they have internally to manage the platform themselves. So yeah, there's a number of factors around that.
Yeah, and then and the Power Platform supports different support models in terms of that, and it's very flexible. So you're absolutely right, John.
Another area that I think of as another kind of complex one that perhaps doesn't sort of meet past expectations of sort of past application development is kind of measuring how happy people are, end users are with the apps that get pushed out into the organization, how well they work, how reliable they are, how well they perform, things like that. That perhaps with a central CRM system, let's say, you have maybe an easier way to gauge it. Have you had any observations about that? Trying to measure how well different apps work, the quality of what citizen developers are, as opposed to the IT department is putting out there?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of things around that, right? I mean, there's the kind of KPIs right around we kind of think around the Power Platform itself, and it's probably sometimes slightly different, as you say, from kind of core systems. But one point that you made that is really interesting to me, right? Is the quality of those applications, right? So you're letting people loose, aren't you, and saying you can use these tools, right, within the organization through the Power Platform, and we're never going to check up on you again. If it's a productivity app, whatever, you've got it. It's yours to use as well. We need to control what connectors it has access to. We've got
Right.
that covered. Eventually, a productivity app could get messy. I mean, it couldn't it? You know what I mean?
Sure.
People have just kind of it becomes Frankenstein's monster, doesn't it? That's my nickname for Jamie. But they, it can get messy. So eventually, it falls to someone to support it, or that application is suddenly that person's left the organization. There's no one to pick it up, and actually, it's become important within a small team. So one of the things that we suggest and is that, as part of your app maker community, you have people, and I suppose people like GSK, the Power Rangers and stuff like that. These guys that are evangelists for the technology, but are also people that know what good looks like. In terms, and I hate to use the word development, but in terms of configuring or developing a Power App, but it's those guys it's really important for them to do some form of sampling, right? Okay, and that might be sampling the app, a number of the Power Apps or a number of the flows, and say, yep, this is the stuff that we're seeing where people aren't using they haven't done it correctly, or they've done it in an efficient way, or they're not using some of the latest capability. So we have seen in a couple of customers that, as part of that app maker community, there's almost like the app maker managers, or whatever you want to call them, that have the remit to do some sampling. Okay, that people are following good practice as well. It's quite a difficult one, right? I mean, people are interested. There are people are saying, "Oh, you've set up a center of excellence. We know. Yeah, what's it doing? You know what I mean?" So I think there's some interesting, kind of KPIs around a center of excellence itself to say, okay, well, how many prototypes have we created? How many of those have gone into production? Right? What is the average time maybe it takes from a concept that someone's come up with from the ideation portal to something to go into production? Right. So it's kind of, you're trying to measure success of the platform. I suppose a critical success of it is that it's the cost of it, isn't it? Like, and the cost of supporting it, it has to be cheaper than it was before. I mean, there's a number of areas around that, isn't there?
Yeah, there's also, one of the things you can extend the COE starter kit to is for quality assurance. So, taking what you've said, Jason, and what John have just said, you can quite easily extend the COE starter kit to have sort of quality assurance checks based on sort of rules that the organization defines, whether that be the app has a certain criticality or is shared amongst a number of certain users. You can have sort of time periods where you have your COE team go in and make sure, do an audit or a quality assurance check on that application to make sure it's following best practices. It's got, hasn't got any unsupported features. It's using the best connectors. The flows are built in best practice ways as well. And that's looking at it from a technical aspect, but you can extend that even further and sort of look at the softer skills and say, actually, do you know what? We're going to actually survey the people who are using the application to take that in. And based on that survey, we can use the Power Platform to guide us on the actions that we need to take, maybe help create a backlog for app development as well. So there's lots of ways you can slice and dice that, and there's lots of opportunity to leverage the platform to support you, not only just in the technical side, but some of the softer aspects as well, taking note of what the users are asking for and their feedback.
One of the other elements that occurs to me that is probably important, I don't hear too much about, though, is the idea of retiring applications that have sort of run their course and need to be replaced. Is that something you see often?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's supposed to something. I mean, Jason, you know HCL, and one of the big offerings that we do in HCL is that piece really, right? Is that Microsoft has spoken long to hard to enterprise customers and showing them the way with the efficiencies they can get with the Power Platform. But Microsoft aren't going to go in there and sit down and go through 1,000 applications and say, okay, these are the ones that you should move to the Power Platform. Because there's one thing for sure, right? Is there's you should move lots of apps to the Power Platform, but there's lots of applications you shouldn't move to the Power Platform for a multitude of reasons. You're not going to jump off SAP and recreate it all within the Power Platform, are you? You know what I mean? It's horses for courses, but that's a big thing we do as an organization. The ability to go into an organization and extract data through discovery tools or from the customer's configuration management database, or doing surveys and stuff like that to say, tell me about those applications that you're using, and then working through those apps and saying, okay, right, kind of put a treatment on this, and we'll break it down into 4 different categories. And those 4 different categories might be that you have a surround strategy. So it might be that actually something, we actually love what this application does in the back end. It's awesome. It's everything we need, beautifully structured. We can get all the data out of that we want about. We can do a statutory return or whatever it is, but the front end must be an absolute nightmare to use for the customer. So it might be a UX pitch. I mean, we've done that at a couple of different organizations right now. We've actually recreated the UI in the Power Platform from a model and a Canvas app perspective, but actually are just pulling data from Oracle in this instance as well, because it doesn't need fully transformed. But it might be that you want to consolidate your applications. It might be that you want to do a full transformation of your lift or shift. So what we do is we go through each one of your apps. We do that kind of explore piece, and then we do kind of an analysis, and then we kind of craft it into that kind of lift and shift, retain and surround, transform and consolidate. And just to give organizations a view to say, yeah, move this one to, you can have a cost saving. Maybe you're using Nintex for your workflows. What's the point in using Nintex anymore when you've got Power Automate? This is the saving that you can make on that as well, and help them create the business case and create a product backlog for those organizations. And those, what we would class as legacy app assessments, are critical for the success of the Power Platform in these organizations.
All right, makes sense. One of them, maybe one particular case that you had mentioned that you're seeing a lot of activity in is one that actually is a bit of a required move, I guess, and that's moving organizations off of old SharePoint workflows that are sort of reaching the end of life.
Yeah, I suppose it's upmost in a lot of people's minds, and I suppose it goes back to the fact that it's the modern workplace guys are getting in touch quite a lot about SharePoint. I think I suppose that's the problem, that SharePoint 10 workflows they were supposed to be deprecated on the 1st of November, but that was Microsoft's opening gambit, and most people have been given an extension till the end of March, which may or may not be enforced, but that's the situation at the minute. And it's a difficult one for organizations. Jamie, we've been talking about we've been talking to people that have got 200, and then we've been talking to people that just have 1,100. So that's 1,100 SharePoint workflows that they have to move off. And those SharePoint workflows might have 10 actions, might have 10 actions, 20 actions, they might have 40 actions as well. So that's quite a scary thing for people to undertake, and undertake in 2 ways, because how many of those workflows are written by people that aren't in the organization right now? That skill set's been lost, hasn't it? Which kind of plays into the reason to have good governance around the Power Platform as well, because you need to know why an app's being created, a business justification, in order to understand to be able to fix it if there's a problem going forward. But going back to SharePoint again, you've got people going, right, I haven't got a clue what that does. Who uses that, who owns that as well. So and that's before people even start to say, okay, now we need the effort, the man days, the wasted time to actually convert those over to Power Automate flows. So what we've been looking at, and we initially started out, Jason was like, let's try to do a little bit of a kind of a Heath Robinson thing, is that you can export your Power your SharePoint workflows to Visio, and obviously Power Automate has the Visio tool where you can import or create a Visio diagram, and then that'll map it to actions. But that just didn't work. We're like, okay, let's build something. So we built an application which not a great name, to be perfectly honest, but all I could come up with at the time was Power Convert. But that's what it does. What it does is we do some analysis based on the output of the modernization scan that Microsoft do, and we look at the type of SharePoint flows that you have. And not every single SharePoint 2010 workflow that you have is a like for like within Power Automate, and the main one there is that there is a content type 2010 workflow that is essentially allows you to create one workflow and map it to multiple components within SharePoint, which is awesome. But there's not the same thing within Power Automate. It's kind of, you need to have one flow per SharePoint component, which is difficult. So what we've enabled for the ones that aren't the content type ones is that we have a tool that can run, and what it will do will take those actions in those workflows and map them directly to Power Automate actions as well. So essentially, we can probably do 70% of your supported SharePoint workflows, and I mean that's a godsend for people, to be perfectly honest. You're talking to some customers that would have been 1,000 days worth of activity to amend all their workflows, to recreate them in Power Automate for value, but not lots of value. So we've been working hard on that tool to build that out, and then we think we know we can bring that down significantly, where it's now very cost effective, and Microsoft are very happy that we've done that. So Jimmy, it's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great, because I think one of the things with the deprecation of the announcement that Microsoft made is it was quite short initially, but they have extended it, giving organizations some time to prepare. But with the sort of level of ingrainment SharePoint 2010 workflows has, it's still a big undertaking. And not only is it a time to sort of leverage a tool like John was talking about in terms of Power Convert, but it's a good chance to rationalize what you've got as well. You might not need to take everything over. So, it's a fresh start, and there's lots of added capability with Power Automate flows that organizations can take advantage of.
That's it, Jimmy. That's exactly it, right? And again, by forcing people to go from SharePoint 2010 workflows to Power Automate, it maybe sullies the name that you're being forced down a road of Power Automate. So you kind of want to make it easier as possible for the organization to migrate to Power Automate, so then they can take advantage of all the great stuff that Power Automate can do, i.e. get rid of your Nintex workflows, bring in those RPA functionality, because all of a sudden you've got a base to work off, haven't you? So I think that's pretty cool.
Okay, well, I guess the other thing that you've touched on it a couple times, but I wanted to get a little more perspective on is some of the licensing challenges from the sort of the Microsoft perspective. I know you talked about some of the cost sharing and the complications there. What do you see coming down the road in terms of licensing? What are you telling customers to look out for, to expect, I don't know, maybe in the next year, as it relates to how licensing works for Power Platform elements?
So I think one of the things of licensing, I know it's a bit of a hot topic, people commenting, especially if you're coming from a SharePoint world and you look at the cost of Dataverse. That's a common conversation that I seem to have. But I think Microsoft have listened to some extent, and they are introducing Dataverse inside of Teams. There's a lot of capability now from the Power Platform that is native within Office 365, so you can leverage that.
And can I just ask, because you mentioned sort of maybe the comparison or there are some analogous elements. That's what I thought of but I haven't really talked about it with many people. Is that kind of one of the comparisons that you think customers are making? They say, well, I've done this in SharePoint, like creating lists in SharePoint. This is going to solve that. This will meet that same need for me with Dataverse in Teams. Is that sort of one of Microsoft's goals, you think, to make that obvious?
I think it is. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's so people can get to grips with Dataverse and understand the benefits it has, even though it's not the full featured Dataverse. It still has a lot of goodness that SharePoint doesn't have. a number of people tell you time and time again, SharePoint is not a relational database, which is it's fine. It has its use cases, but I think Dataverse within Teams has a lot more scalability in terms of the number of records it can manage, and in the sort of the usage of that from a end user perspective. But I think it's a great way to sort of dip your toe in the water, try Dataverse, and then sort of actually think, this does drive a lot of value within the business. We can use this for X, Y, and Z reason. Why don't we upgrade and make use of the full Dataverse licensing? Because it does come with a lot of rich capabilities within the full Power Platform licensing model.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, Jimmy. I mean, I think what we see with customers is that dipping their toe in the water is sweating their E3 and E5 licenses to say we can take advantage of the Power Platform within the context of our E3 and E5 licenses, but it's very one-eyed, right? And Jamie, in terms of the ability from a governance point of view, but also the ability to have a SharePoint is not a relational database. You will not see a single view of the customer record within SharePoint. It's just not what it does, right? But you do that next step up with Dataverse within Teams. You're getting all that. It takes you forward as an organization, and it's a much easier step in your business case to say, now I want to do this. I think it was a necessary step from Microsoft to introduce Dataverse in the context of Teams. I think it solves a problem from them as well, because people don't want to have that big investment. They want to prove the technology first, and we see a lot of the deals that Microsoft are doing at the minute. They're not doing a deal for 5,000, 10,000 licenses. What they're doing is what we class as ramped deals. So they're saying, okay, we'll do this amount in year one. Because the customer believes in the technology, but they're not going to buy it all in one go. So it becomes a ramp deal. They'll 2,000 year one, they'll do 4,000 as well. As the momentum builds in the organization. So again, with that licensing model, it being ramped, it'll grow with the success of the platform within the organization. So it's from 2 point of views, from a technology point of view with Teams and Dataverse, and from the ability to buy slightly differently. That's not going to be available for all customers to buy like that, but for the bigger customers, that's the conversations they're having.
Interesting. I mean, what that just makes me think of is how different some of these types of investments are compared to more traditional, on both sides, on the enterprise software side and on the productivity and office side of things.
It's a different ball game, isn't it? It completely is. And look, as I say, I was a consultant for years, but essentially, I'm a sales guy right now. It's a different way of selling. It really is. You have to understand where the customer is coming from. Where they are in their journey. Right, what are those applications that are the big ticket ones that kind of prove the business case within the organization? And it's just different for everyone. It's different for Microsoft. I think a lot of the SSPs and the TSPs, who haven't had to sell Azure yet, they're now seeing that this consumption model is a different way of selling completely. But everyone's learning. I mean, how do you support these applications, Jason? I mean, that's a massive question as well. You have one thing, it's supporting the platform itself, which is straightforward, but actually supporting these applications. If you have a central mandated low code, no code platform like the Power Platform, then people will associate anything they create using this platform as something that can be supported, but it can't be supported. The organization needs to put in the effort and the time to create that app maker community so they can support themselves for those productivity apps, right? They need to have some integration between the Power Platform and, say, their ServiceNow system or their ITSM system to say that, we need to have a view on all these applications, that any changes to those applications updates my CMDB as well. But when we're doing these conversations in the context of a center for excellence or center of excellence or whatever you want to call it, there's so many stakeholders in there. It's completely different for everyone. Everyone's learning with this platform, and it's an education for all of us. But I've learned so much over the last year and a half.
Before we wrap up, I'm just thinking, do you want to, I don't know, how can people get in touch with you if they're listening here? Anything you want to point people to?
Our website's www.powerobjects.com. Jamie, if you just give your email address and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, sure. So people can contact me on jamie.barker, at HCL-PowerObjects.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at jab365.
Yeah, and also I think maybe Jason, you'll put this out a bit later, but we also have a landing page, for which is https powerobjects.com landings podcast power platform as well. So we've got lots of good content up there, guys. And we did a really good webinar a few weeks ago that really is a deep dive in some of these themes we've talked about today, and that's on our webinar on demand. But look, really, really happy we're really happy to chat to you guys as well, because the whole Power Platform is part of a wider community, isn't it? So we're all learning from each other. So, it'd be great just to have a conversation offline as well for anybody who just wants to have a chat.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these topics you really can just keep talking about. There's so many different elements to.
But it changes every week, Jason, doesn't it? Because everyone's, the technology changes every few weeks, but also, the gotchas around implement it changes every week as well. So you're just constantly learning.
Yeah, and also the people who are getting involved in it, people from different organizations, coming from different types of work that are now doing Power Platform related things. That adds to the whole landscape.
Yeah, totally. And then people who have been using, Pega or something like that, a low code, no code platform, and all of a sudden they're bringing the stuff they've learned from implementing those products or Domino or something like that. They're bringing those skills to bear as well. It's constant.
Yeah. Even just moving all those SharePoint experts over piece by piece, I suppose that must be happening too.
Yeah, totally, and it's the same skill set, but it's a different skill set at the same time, isn't it? Yeah, and there's I suppose there's a little bit of resistance with people when you've been a SharePoint person for that length of time. It's an opportunity for people to learn, but also they're still a SharePoint person at heart, aren't they?
Well, this has been great, John, Jamie. Thank you both so much for taking the time today. Like you said, we'll put some links into the description with more information on how to find out more information. But this has been a lot of fun. I hope we can do it again soon.
All right, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Jason. Thank you.
Thanks.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to John and Jamie of HCL Power Objects for joining me today. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Please also look for us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.